frequently on yearly basis, I would, train 100 between billionaire and multi-millionaires, and they're all miserable. And it's really, really eye-opening. It's really eye-opening that you get everything that the modern world is telling us is what we need, but in reality, you're still unable to find that contentment and peace and happiness with the situation. While you, Joe, would go into a race where you're half of you is buried in snow, and you can find that, like, I'm happy with this, I'm okay with this, I'm enjoying this. Now, this difference is to be understood. Take the situation we're in now, COVID-19.
Welcome to the Spartan Up podcast with Joe De Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Race.
We are talking about overcoming obstacles. The same way we teach people to get over obstacles on the course, we will teach you here on the Spartan Up podcast to get over obstacles in your mind.
Gawdat, today's guest on Spartan Up, says happiness, like fitness, is something you can build. The author of Solve for Happy and the former chief business officer of Google X is today on a mission to teach the art, the practice, and the science of happiness. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Headspace. You deserve to feel happier, and Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/Spartan for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation.
Call me Mo or Hey, and I'll be fine.
and you've got a podcast called Slow Mo, and my little bit of understanding is you want us all to slow down. Explain that.
Well, you and I are not that different. Let's put it this way. We want to find the optimal path through life. Okay. I believe that the modern life comes with a ton of waste, right? It really, really consumes you in ways that are not good for your mind, for your being, if you want. And that while we believe somehow that rushing around in life and doing more and wanting more and engaging more is good for us, I think doing that wisely would allow you to get the good out of it, but at the same time allow yourself to slow down. And when you slow down, lots of interesting stuff happens. You start to find that space in your mind to reflect on what you actually want, what you're doing well, what you can do better, what you need to change about your life. But it also allows you to connect to yourself in many ways. A lot of the Spartan work is around getting us embodied into that, physical form that needs to, when you were talking on slow-mo, you said it's like a pool, huh? It needs to be, the pump needs to run. Similarly, our mind is so full of clutter. And somehow to clean that clutter, you need to get out of the swamp. You need to get out of that noise. You need to spend time where you can reflect and find your true path, if you want, your better path in life.
What if the exercise and the hardship practice that I speak of at Spartan, what if I told you that helps clean the mind? Is that
totally?
You know what I mean? I think we need to clean the mind and get blood flowing. And, it's not enough to just sit around and slow down.
Yeah, so definitely not. It's not at all. Huh? So it's not one or the other. Okay. I think what the exercise does is it purges the mind. Again, when we were talking, you were saying about that Spartan line, the idea of me going through a little bit of a stretch for my typical capabilities gets me to really connect with the reality. It gets me to connect with what I need to understand about life. But the truth about life, Joe, is that we create a lot of illusions in our mind that are not a choice, believe it or not. They're conditioned into us. They are told to us by advertisement, by sometimes a spiritual teacher or a religious background. They're told to us by our friends, our mothers, our family, and so on and so forth. And all of that conditioning requires you to purge it, not just on regular basis, but you need to find the root that continues to bring it up. if you know what I mean. So, you can have so much clutter in your head, you go for a run and that clutter goes away, right? But then there is this little sore part in your head that continues to generate that clutter again. And if you manage to find that bit and work on it, right? If you manage to find that bit and actually kill it, somehow it doesn't come up again, or at least it comes up much less frequently. And that is work that is not done by removing the symptoms, the lactic acid on your muscles. It doesn't, if you found a way to remove the reason for that, then it becomes easier, to find a state of calm and bliss and happiness.
That makes perfect sense. We got to get to the root cause of the issue. And I know I sound like such a one-focused guy.
We all are. Yeah. To a hammer, everything is a nail, right? So, to me, it's all mind training and work and engineering. And to you, it's all, Spartans.
I'm a one-focused guy. As you said, we all are, right? Maybe part of the reason, maybe in some instances, Mo, how do you feel about this? The reason people are in their own head, the reason the clutter is appearing is because they're eating shitty food and not exercising.
Totally. So in my theory, the famous part of my work is something that's called the happiness equation, right? And in my view, by the way, we need to come to a definition of what happiness is, because happiness is not just the waste of time. It actually is a mindset that allows you to perform in life. But in the happiness equation, I say that happiness is predictable, that you can actually follow an algorithm similar to training, similar to the idea of if I eat healthy and work out, I'll be fitter. If I make happiness my priority and do the work, I'll be happier. Now, the challenge here is the following. That state of happiness only happens when your basic needs for survival are met. So if you look at any child, any infant you've ever seen, if they're safe, if they're loved, if they're fed, if they're warm, if their basic needs for survival are met, their state is happy. They're playing with their toes and they don't want an Xbox. They don't care what people think about them on social media. They're just happy. It's our innate state, if you want, that calmness and peace of I'm okay with life as it is. Now, what happens, however, is that this state of happiness requires that basic need. There is a lot of research, for example, that says if your income is below the average income of the country you live in, which basically means you cannot put enough food on the table, you would end up feeling unhappy. It's very difficult to find happiness. And the more income you get until you reach that point, you become happier. It's basic need. Now, one of our basic needs is for us to feel healthy, is for us to feel that we're not throwing crap into our bodies all the time. And you're the biggest advocate of that. I mean, in reality, we have no idea that stuff that we eat. And we have, again, when we were talking on Slow Mo, you brought up a very good point that this stuff is engineered in ways that are totally inhuman, right? And so because you're so off balance, you're so off your basic needs for being healthy, being fit, being vigilant. Remember, the design we are in is I'm supposed to notice if a tiger is coming. If I'm binge watching Netflix and eating, potato chips, I could be half eaten before I even recognize that thing coming to me, right? And so the reality is that healthy form of being is a basic need for survival. And without it, it's very difficult to find happiness. Without it, you start to get all of those weird thoughts in your head, okay? And those weird thoughts are partially because of the way you interpret life, your conditioning, right? But also partially because of the situation you put yourself into. If you're constantly in back pains, you believe that life is horrendously unfair, right? But is it really unfair, or is it your practices that are leading you to that place where you end up feeling that life is unfair? And I think those things are highly interrelated. It's not one or the other. It's one that drives the other.
Here's an interesting thing. As you're talking about happiness and making sure we have our basic needs, I went to a place in my mind. As I told you, I did a lot of long distance races. One race in particular, I was in waist deep snow for a couple of weeks. It was
Oh
very,
my
very
God.
cold, 30 below.
Man.
But I was happy. I was
Yeah,
extremely happy.
totally.
And I, as I was thinking, and you were describing, I thought, would a billionaire have been happy in that situation? Because
Totally not.
they might have lost a bunch of money to be there. Would somebody that's living below the poverty line on an income base, would they be happy there? And I think no, but I think a lot of people would be happy there because your machine is operating. I was walking and hiking. The sun was out. I was in waist deep snow. It was cold, but I don't know. I found a very calm, peaceful happiness. Not to say I didn't want to get home and get warm, because now I'm really thinking about that time. Not to say I didn't want a good meal, but it's pretty rewarding and refreshing to be there. I had to hit mute because my kids started screaming in the background. Sorry.
So let's understand how happiness works. By the way, since I wrote Solve for Happy, so Solve for Happy became, if you want, the engineering approach to happiness. It's a very logical way to a topic that is highly mysticized, if you want. Okay, and so I ended up being invited to train tons of celebrities and very high net worth individuals. So frequently on yearly basis, I would train 100 between billionaire and multi-millionaires, and they're all miserable. And it's really, really eye-opening. It's really eye-opening that you get everything that the modern world is telling us is what we need, but in reality, you're still unable to find that contentment and peace and happiness with the situation. While you, Joe, would go into a race where you're half of you is buried in snow, and you can find that, I'm happy with this, I'm okay with this, I'm enjoying this. Now, this difference is to be understood. Take the situation we're in now, COVID-19. Half of us are actually excited and doing something about it and engaging and creating new projects and handling it. And some of us are even happy about it. I'm really excited about the spare time that I get without traveling that allows me to write more and so on and so forth. While others are completely miserable, completely the world is horrible, everything is wrong. And it's the same event. We're all being locked down the same way. We're all at the same threat and level of threat of a virus, which basically tells you there is something about your own makeup that turns an event into an event where you can handle or be happy about, or turns the same event into I hate this, right? That is what I tried to describe in the happiness equation. So if you really look at every moment in your life where you felt happy, it wasn't a moment where life gave you something in specific. Okay, rain doesn't make anyone happy or unhappy, right? Rain has no inherent value of happiness in it. If you wanted to water your plants, rain makes you very, very happy. If you wanted to sunbathe, rain will make you very unhappy, right? It's not rain itself. It's the way you look at life as you compare rain to your expectation of how life should behave. Okay, and so I describe that in an equation. I say your happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the events of your life and your expectations and wishes and hopes of how life should behave. Now, you take the situation where you're in the snow. You can take that situation and in your mind say, I am cold, I am miserable, I'm hungry, I'm away from my kids, and you'll feel unhappy. Okay, you can take that same situation and say, I'm making progress, I'm stretching my abilities, I'm proving to myself a new height of where I can go. And that is what I expect from myself. This is truly, from our conversation, which was the first time we met, this is truly the essence of Joe that I met. I want to make this being stretch himself to the maximum height, the maximum he can go. And as long as you're meeting that, you're happy, right? You're feeling content with life. You're feeling that life is worth your effort. Imagine if you were in that race and you were not performing, right? If you were in that race and you were not performing, your state would simply be, I'm very unhappy. Not because of the snow, but because you're missing your own expectations of Joe needs to perform. And that, I think, is where life becomes, hi, That is where life becomes really interesting. It's that comparison that happens in our brain that drives happiness. And it's also, by the way, the same reason it drives unhappiness.
You know, I'm really lucky, and I think you're really lucky in that I figured out that equation at a young age, but I didn't actually know it until you just described it. And what I did was a little bit of algebra every day.
Exactly.
Right. And what I would do is I would say, okay, this situation sucks, but it could be worse. My expectations could be here.
Yeah.
Right. And if they were there, well, wow, I'm pretty lucky.
Totally.
Right. And
totally.
And so I think we could all use a little bit of that practice. And I don't know if you push that or not, but I suspect you do, which is, you know, here's the example. At Spartan, we have a prayer. Not very many brands have a prayer. We have a prayer. And the prayer stems from a 1940s French paratrooper who died in World War II. They found the prayer in his pocket. And he basically said, God, you know, he wrote this out before he died. He said, God, look, everybody's asking you for the good stuff. They want to get back with their spouses, back with their girlfriends or boyfriends. They want to get back to a good meal, back to a house, back home. You probably don't have any of that left. So give me the worst stuff you got and promise me you'll keep it coming and give me the strength to deal with it. And so he just flipped it on its head, right? Because if you're sitting there and you're waiting to get a good meal or get back with your family, but it doesn't come, you're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
But if you're expecting the worst stuff you got and it turns out to be an okay day, you're like, oh, this is an easy day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about, this is the absolute truth. By the way, that meal is not going to come. The problem with our modern world, Joe, is that we always expect another meal, right? So if you live in India, and I know you've traveled in India quite a lot, huh? If you live in India, you expect, I may not eat today. If they give you a bowl of rice, you're the happiest person on earth, right? But then go from India a little bit to the west and cross through Dubai, where everyone's expecting to park their Rolls Royce and go in for the most expensive meal that is covered with gold leaves, and suddenly you realize that, hey, you know what? If the gold leaves are not perfect, I'm unhappy, right? We always, humans, we can't be satisfied because every time we achieve a goal, we move the goalposts. And the reality is, one way of finding happiness is to say, it could have been much worse. Remember, again, when we were talking on slow-mo, I took a note and I told you it will inspire thousands. The idea of the samurai burning everything before they go to bed, saying, I could have lived a life today where I lost all my family, all my possessions, everything. Okay, and I call that in my book, I call that looking down. Looking down is the idea of, how we're raised in the West. I'm from the East, raised with Eastern, traditions, if you want, and educated in the West. And in the West, we're taught about self-esteem. And self-esteem is, I need to feel good about myself because I did better than the other guy, right? And of course, the reality is you can't do better than the other guy on everything. As a matter of fact, you're doing better than the other guy on something, and the other guy is doing better than you on another thing. But there is this third guy who has a shitty life, okay, that you completely ignore because you're looking at the guy that is above you, that is, has a bigger house or an easier life or a taller wife, whatever that is. And somehow, if you manage to look at the other guy below you, you'll find that you're so much better off, that you are so blessed. And by the way, you've done fuck all to earn that right. Because I'll tell you openly, for that one sperm to reach that one egg, out of 1 billion possibilities for you to be born to that family, to be educated that way, in your case, to go and, work with that mob leader that teaches you something that changes your life. The odds, the mathematical odds of that are bigger than winning the lottery. And yet here you are, born in the US, for example, and not born in Syria. And you take that for granted. You don't even think about it. And you say, I'm upset because my girlfriend, she said that on Friday. Like, what the hell? And on Friday, that guy was being bombed as he was running through the maze of the broken, buildings of Syria, as you know, and haven't had anything to eat for the last week and doesn't know when he will eat next. And you're complaining about your girlfriend saying this. Like, seriously, where do we get that from? When will we wake up to the reality of how blessed we are?
I was just thinking, if you and I took over the country, if you were president, I was vice president, we could put in like a video game, like a mandatory, everybody has to have an avatar in a very, very harsh place in the world.
Totally.
Right? And whenever you complain, you automatically get zapped to that place.
We'll be right back to the interview, but first I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Headspace. Meditation sounds great, right? So many of the guests we interview on the podcast have talked about the benefits. Mark Devine, Andrew Huberman, behavioral psychologist Rebecca Heiss, Ariana Huffington, but it's not easy. Today's sponsor, Headspace, is changing that. You probably tried meditation before and it didn't work, right? Or maybe you felt like you were doing it wrong. If mental health is part of your plan, and it should be, you owe it to yourself to try Headspace. Imagine your own little pocket-sized guide that helped you sleep better, focus better, and perform at a higher level. It exists, and if you have 10 minutes, Headspace can change your life. Meditation can help with burnout, with stress, even mood. Headspace has data to back it up. Check out the numbers. 4 weeks of Headspace can increase focus by 14%. Only 3 weeks of use has been shown to cut aggression to negative feedback by a whopping 57%. That's huge. And with Headspace, you can be 28% less sad in just 10 days. You deserve to feel happier, and Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/Spartan. That's headspace.com/Spartan, and you'll get a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. This is the best deal they offer right now, so just do it. Head to headspace.com/Spartan and check it out. Okay, back to the interview.
We could put in like a video game, like a mandatory, everybody has to have an avatar in a very, very harsh place in the world.
Totally.
Right? And whenever you complain, you automatically get zapped to that place.
Exactly. It's like, sit down, hold the controller and play. But you know what? So I actually use that analogy quite a lot. So I'm a very serious gamer. I mean, I'm a businessman, chief business officer of Google X or whatever that is. But in my time, I actually train like an athlete. I'm one of the top 0.04% of all players in the world on a game called Halo. And Halo, when you really think about it, is hell. Like, your avatar is being shot at, it's being squished with cars and vehicles, it's being dropped in lava. And when you really, really are in that place, you're completely miserable. Like, the avatar is completely miserable. When I played, I used to play with my late son, and my son was, at the time I was, reasonable. I play difficult or heroic. I mean, he was legendary. He was what the game was written for. So when I played like a strategic engineer. I start the level, I go to the right, and I run as fast as I can. And Ali would like put his controller down and go like, Papa, where are you going? And I'm like, Habibi, the end of the level is here. And he goes like, who wants to get to the end of the level? We're playing. Life is about that game. If you get to the end of the level, you die. Who freaking wants that, right? You want to play. And he would go, interestingly, almost like he's choosing to go to the Spartan race. He would go to the places where there are explosions and smoke. Okay. He would go to the places where it's really tough. And I go like, but Ali, that doesn't make sense. Even if we're not running to the end of the level, let's at least find an easy path. And he goes like, but that's where all the fun is. That's where you develop and grow. This is where you become a better gamer. And I think, even though you and I come at life from almost different, opposite angles, this is the whole idea. The whole idea is I want to be a better gamer. I want to be able to deal with life with the maximum potential that I've ever been given. And one way of doing that is to actually go through the tough parts. And the other way is to sometimes simulate those tough parts in your head. to say, what if instead of getting my burger a little cold, I didn't have anything to eat for the last 2 weeks? Okay, what if it wasn't COVID-19? What if it was the Spanish flu in the 1920s, where we had no clue what we were doing? We had no Netflix, we had no Zoom to connect to each other. We had nothing, right? What if this was World War III? What if, right? And if you start to think about all of those what ifs, play those scenarios in your head, not in expecting them to happen, suddenly they make you realize how fortunate, how blessed we are. This is the game. This is the game we're playing, and games are supposed to be tough.
I love that. I'm sorry about your son, but that's a great memory, and you just gave me an idea that we should call it a Spartan simulation. So
totally,
the next time you complain about anything, mandatory Spartan simulation. Tell us how it could have been worse.
You know what's the best simulation, Joe? Fast for a day. Just completely, push yourself. Of course, if you're athletic, you fast most of the time. Most of us intermittent fast now for a living, right? But really, get yourself to, as you said again on slow-mo, get yourself to practice poverty. Okay, tell yourself, can I, thinking that I'm not blessed, can I actually leave my blessings for a week? Can I live? I always told people, when they came to me and complained about silly shit, which sadly happens all the time, I said, okay, I'm going to ask you in your head, you don't have to do it physically, but I'm going to ask you in your head to do one thing for me. I want you to imagine that homeless person downstairs, whether in New York in January or in San Francisco in the middle of, of all of the flamboyance of San Francisco. I want you to imagine that homeless person and go tell him what you just told me. Just imagine you sitting next to them and saying, life is tough because, my girl said this and then my boyfriend did that. And, my friend didn't text me for a week and they didn't like my post on Instagram. And, I'm locked down and binge watching Netflix because of COVID-19. And although I am healthy and I didn't die and I didn't lose anyone that I love, I'm still complaining because, they're locking me down and the policy makers are so horrendous. And go tell that to the homeless person. Seriously, if you think you have problems, summon the courage and sit next to a homeless person who hasn't eaten anything, who's freezing his ass off in the streets of New York, who is being ignored by everyone, avoided by everyone. By the way, not always for their own mistakes. By the way, many of them, just life turned against them, and they found themselves in that place. And go tell them that. And suddenly you will realize, I have no problems at all.
You and I never talked about it. I love that. You and I never talked about it, but that mob boss that taught me back in the neighborhood, one day he said to me, there's another lesson, a fourth lesson nobody knows. He said to me, hey, Joe, because I was complaining about something. He said, if you put all your problems on the table right here and I put my problems on the table, you would take yours back. And that's
absolutely
really what you're saying.
Absolutely. 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 And by the way, you know what's really interesting, which is again what I love about your work, Joe, is that we have a saying. I come from the Middle East, so we have a very strong Islamic culture that rules most of the tradition, and we have a saying in Islam that basically says you will never be given more challenges than you're able to handle. Okay, which is really interesting because you and I know, as we grew in business, as we grew in life, as we grew in the number of people that depend on us, that every time you became a little more capable, every time you handled a challenge, the next one was a little more difficult. It's the way life works, really. If you're able to handle the game with ease, the game becomes a little more difficult because it wants you to reach that point of fatigue, almost like working out, so that you can become more fit. And so in reality, I will tell you hands down, for every person on the planet, they think that their challenge is the hardest challenge on the planet. Because to them, this is the fitness level they are at handling challenges. So you take anything really, and you just take whatever you're going through and you go like, it's so hard. I sometimes say, when my son left our world, Ali left due to a stupid medical error. And he was the simplest medical procedures, surgical procedures, and the surgeon did 5 mistakes in a row. All of them are mistakes. All of them were preventable, okay? And all of them were fixable. And Ali died. Ali left. And if you asked me at the time I was chief business officer of Google X, very, very well off. Every dream. I mean, I was born and raised in Egypt. I didn't have much dreams in life at all. Huh? And then I'm like an international success and doing all of that stuff. And I promise you, if God had taken, or life, whichever you want to believe in, had taken all of my possessions, everything that I owned, every car, every dollar, every title, every fancy suit, and left me with nothing, I would have been okay. It wasn't a test for me. I've been trained for that. I've been through the ups and downs. I can handle this. The biggest test he could have taken is Ali, okay? Believe it or not, even though my daughter Aya is my wonderful sunshine in my life now, but Aya was the risky one, right? She jumped from aeroplanes and she did the crazy stuff. So you would have sort of expected, if something happened to Aya, it was a little more likely than Ali, right? She was a little more in that dangerous life, if you want. But Ali specifically was that little Zen monk who didn't really, take risks that often, and was really so loved. It was like, why would life take this one? Because I mean, it's stupid to personalize that way, because life is not about me. It's his life when he went. But from my perspective, it's because this is the ultimate test. This was the only test at the time that would have stretched me a little further. Okay. And so, yeah, you take that test, you do it well. Now I'm taking the test of thousands of others, like almost because of the way the book became such a success. I almost participate in thousands of grief moments every week. Everyone around the world will share with me their grief. And I'll tell you, and please don't be shocked, my story is easier. My story, horrendous as it is, medical mistake for a young man that's 21 years old in his prime, beautiful, fit, wise, loved, is so much easier than so many other stories that I receive. And when you think about it that way, you go like, stupid, impossible to say, but believe it or not, even losing Ali was not the worst case scenario. I could have lost him in a much more horrendous, painful, and difficult way.
Yeah, no, you and I are, you had said earlier, we're more alike than you think, even though you're slow-mo and I'm Fast Joe.
Exactly, Fast Joe.
You're very, very similar. And all right, let's go to this place. 3 things people could do on a daily basis you've learned after talking to all the people you talked to, going through this tough tragedy you had, being at Google X. 3 things every day people should practice or do to be a little happier.
I think that so let's start with happiness is like fitness, meeting yourself, and taking charge. Okay, so let's take those with a few examples. Happiness truly is like fitness. Most people don't understand that, but if there are 100,000 people out there in your neighborhood that are claiming they figured out the exact mechanics of like this machine and that contraption and those many exercises, and you do this and that and you'll get fit. When you and I speak, you tell me, look, it's about getting fit and pushing your limits. Sorry, eating healthy and pushing your limits, right? It's simple as that. Huh? Make fitness your priority enough so that you don't eat the cheesecake, at least not all the time. And practice. Now, our happiness is exactly the same. It just follows, instead of the responses that muscles do to fatigue, happiness follows something that's known as neuroplasticity. You need to make happiness your priority so that when you make choices that are based on this will make me happier, not just richer, not just a better title, not just get a prettier boyfriend or girlfriend and so on. Look for choices that make you happier and do the work. I say go to the happiness gym 4 to 5 times a week. What is going to the happiness gym? It's basically understanding the reasons that make you unhappy, spending time with people that are happy. Don't spend time with people that are miserable and just bring their problems to you. It is about, maybe watching a documentary, listening to a podcast, reading a book, whatever that is. It is about doing certain practices, like, the Spartan line, imagining that you're going below the line so that you find gratitude. Fantastic, right? That one practice, if you can do this frequently, to really remind yourself of the reasons why you should be happy. If you want to do yoga, do yoga. If you want to meditate, whatever it is, but find practices that make you happy and do more of them. I shy away from saying what exact practice, because each of us is different. But if you at least commit to watching an hour a day, 3 to 4 times a week of a conversation around happiness until you figure out your own challenges. Once you find your own challenges and your own practices, do more of these, okay? And the trick is, again, remember you taught me workout has to be the first thing in the morning. Yes, your well-being has to be the first thing in the morning. So, I work out the first thing in the morning, like you said, but I also meditate the first thing in the morning. I have an exercise that I call Meet Becky the first thing in the morning. I'll tell you about it in point number 2, and so on and so forth. But make those things your priority. So do them first, give them the time first, put them in your calendar first, and then do everything else. That's one. The second is, I call it Meet Becky or Meet Yourself. Meet Yourself is a very difficult exercise. I was training a group, 14 very high net worth individuals from Northern Europe once. And, around 4 hours, it was a 3 days retreat, so we were not rushed. But around 4 hours into the retreat, I was on the second line of my first slide, 4 hours in, because they debated everything. So I would say everyone wants to be happy, for example. I don't remember the exacts, but that statement would receive a debate from someone that is then debated by someone that is then debated by the third, and then the third would debate the first again, and they would constantly debate. And I loved it. I mean, I was in no rush, because in reality, happiness is a journey where you find your own self. So I was like, yeah, go ahead. And then 4 hours in, I asked them and I said, guys, are you okay with the pace we're going through? And they said, yeah, this is very useful. It's, debate is helping us get to the truth. I was like, that's fascinating, because, the truth is really important. Happiness is all found in the truth. But can I ask you a question? And they said, yes. And I said, if debate is helping you get to the truth, have you ever debated anything your brain told you? And they were quiet for a while. Like, seriously, what do you mean? Like, my brain knows the truth. And I said, that's actually not the truth. And if you actually debate that statement that your brain knows the truth, you might actually not debate the other guy, but rather listen to what the other guy is saying, because it could change your mind a little. And I think this idea of meeting yourself is so fundamental to finding happiness, because most of our unhappiness results from conditioning of things that are not good for us, that we become so associated with, right? All of those things that we're told are important, when in reality, they're not important for us at all. The way we look, the way the possessions that we have, having a bigger house than the neighbor, and those ideas that we believe in so strongly, they require revisiting. They require debate. But that debate is not happening between you and others. It's happening between you and you. And so I actually have a daily exercise that I call Meet Becky, which is 25 minutes in the morning, where I'm not meditating. I'm actually listening to my brain, listening with notes. So I take notes, okay? And I have two guidelines for that practice. One is, my brain is allowed to say anything that it wants. I will acknowledge what it says, not debate it, not, push back. And I will ask for the next thing. So my brain will say, hey, by the way, your daughter hates you. Ooh, interesting, Becky. You think my daughter hates me? All right, let's write that down. What else? Okay, you're going to be late for your meeting. Oh, we're going to be late for the meeting. What else? What else? What else? Just get it all out. Purge it out of your head. And then the second practice is, Becky's not allowed to say the same thing twice. And that little practice changes everything. Somehow, when you start listening to your brain goes like, shit, he's listening. What I need to say something intelligent now. And when you start to tell it, but you're not allowed to say the same thing twice, very quickly you realize that all of this noise in your head somehow actually runs out very quickly. In my case, normally within 11 minutes, I'm at total silence. You go to your brain and go like, well, yeah, so brain, what else? Your daughter doesn't love you. Okay, you told me that before. What else? And it goes like, that's it really. I have nothing else to say, right? With that exercise, something amazing happens. Suddenly you start to see things in front of you that are bullshit when you see them in front of you. It's like, where did you come up with that, Becky? It's like, my daughter doesn't, as a matter of fact, on WhatsApp, she just texted me that yesterday night saying, I love you, Papa. Like, where the F did you get that from? And by revisiting some of those, by revisiting my relationship with women, my beliefs in terms of my career, what matters to me in terms of financial success, what matters to me in terms of my relationship with friends, what matters to me in social media, and so on and so forth. When you start to debate those things, your life flips upside down, because you suddenly realize that 90% of your unhappiness is what I call unnecessary unhappiness. It's driven by things you don't even want. You know, if they didn't exist at all, you wouldn't even care about them. But you've been conditioned to care about them that much. The third thing, which I think is really the core, is that people believe that happiness comes from outside us, that life gives us the conditions to be happy or unhappy, and that's absolutely not true. That's exactly what Fast Joe will say about fitness, okay? Life is to be taken charge of, right? You have the right to tell yourself, I am going to be happy. It's predictable. It follows an equation. There are lots of teachings out there, whether, by embodying yourself in your own physical form, like Joe says, or by practicing gratitude, like this spiritual teacher says, or by looking at what I call the 6 grand illusions. That's what Mo says. Okay. And the only common thing among all of them is you have to take charge. If you don't take charge, good luck. It's simply like, if you don't take charge of your diet, you're going to be 600 pounds. There's no way outside of that, right? It's the typical way we're designed. And happiness, and I know it upsets a lot of people, is a choice. It's a choice. I'm going to look at the situation we're in right now and either tell myself, I hate my life, or tell myself, okay, life has changed. What am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about my business? What am I going to do about being locked down? What am I going to do about being fit when in an environment that is not as easy to be out as I used to be? What else? Whatever. But I am in charge. And unless I accept that happiness is not happening to me from outside me, it's the result of every action that I decide to take. Yeah, you'll never get there. So I keep reminding myself with targets and objectives. Just like, you would tell people, eat this and do that, and don't do this and do that. I do the same. I say, okay, you're suffering a little bit of the illusion of control recently. Okay, here are the practices you need to do to remind yourself that life will go out of control. And these are the practices that you will do to ensure that you do committed acceptance, that you can actually accept when things go out of control and do something about it so that you can make things better.
I love it. How do people find you?
Slow Mo is the podcast. You'll find that on all podcast apps. SLOMO. My Instagram is Mo_Gawdat. My Facebook is mo.gawdat.official. My LinkedIn is Mo Gawdat, and my Twitter is mgawdat. Of course, you can search for Solve for Happy or 1 Billion Happy as websites, but who uses websites? So get in touch. Actually, I answer as I try really hard to answer every single message I get personally. There is not a machine and not a bot answering. I answer every question, and get in touch, and hopefully I can be a small part of your journey to happiness.
I love it. I love it. And you promised to come do a Spartan race. So together.
Oh man, don't, when I committed that in front of my audience on slow-mo, I can handle them. Now you're committing me in front of your audience.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Headspace. You deserve to feel happier, and Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/Spartan for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation.